Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our third workshop in our second series on closing the loop. I'm Jane Cherry from the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre, and we are a partner in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. And together we're bringing you this workshop series on closing the loop in your food garden. The first series looked at how to set up your household food garden, and Courtney is with us and she will share in the chat the links. We recorded all of those, so if you missed them, you can go and check them out on YouTube. Thanks, Courtney. And then today's workshop, our previous two workshops, so the first workshop, Courtney will share the link, and then we've had two workshops in this series. The first one was on, what was it? Let me find it. Food forests and land management. And then 2 weeks ago, we had one on water management in your food garden. And today we're going to be looking at waste management and composting in your food garden. And then our final workshop will be next week, Wednesday, where we're going to be looking at seed saving, setting up a seed bank, and also indigenous knowledge and indigenous seeds. Thanks, Courtney, for sharing that in the chat. So if you've missed any of those, please have a look. They're all on YouTube. So today's program is going to start off with some input from John Nzira. As usual, we've pre-recorded his input. And then after him, we'll have Simon Mbata, who's from the South African Waste Pickers Association, and he will share with us a little bit more about what is zero waste and how does it benefit society? What does it mean for society? And so, as always, we hope that by the end of the series, you'll have enough information to close the loop in your food gardens by reducing the needs for external inputs through recycling, redirecting, and reusing what you have. We hope that you're also able to increase your yields, also increase your health, your soil health and fertility, and then, of course, nutritious food for you and your community, and that you're also able to share your knowledge with others. We also hope that you will contribute to the Food Commons map. And Courtney, if you could also please just share that in the chat. So this is a map which we developed earlier this year, where we are trying to list all the Food Commons initiatives in South Africa. So whether it's a pavement food garden, a household food garden, a community soup kitchen, communal kitchen, small-scale farm in your community, we really want to be able to map where all of these are. So that we can see what's out there, but then also look at how we can start networking and possibly scaling up some of these interventions. So please follow that link in the chat and list your food garden if you've managed to set it up. And then some housekeeping, which I shared earlier, just to go over. If you have any questions or comments, please write them in the chat as we go along. If you have any questions for Simon or John, please write them, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A session where we will try and address all your questions. As I said, we recorded and we will be recording this workshop and we will share it with everyone who's registered. It's playing live on Facebook now, so it will also be available on the SAWPA Facebook page. We've set up an agroecology advice panel, so if you ever have any questions, you can just simply WhatsApp this panel. So drop me an email or DM us on Facebook or social media and we can share those contacts with you. And okay, that's all from me. I'm just checking the chat. Okay, so Courtney has shared all those links. So I'm going to hand over to the recording of John. Just need to get it ready. In the meantime, so I asked John to give us an input. Sorry, it seems like it's starting. I asked John to give us an input on. This isn't working. Okay, nearly there. So I asked him to give us an input on composting, and then he started off his session with looking at soil fertility, and I thought maybe he got the wrong memo. But then I realized he's actually just taking us to the basics. Why do we do these things, such as composting? Why do we save our organic waste, mix it with some wood ash and organic waste from the garden? And so in this presentation, John really takes us to the basics, helps us to understand why we need to compost, and that is for soil health and for healthy food. So I am going to play this.
Okay, today we are going to talk about natural fertilizers. A natural fertilizer to boost and improve the soils and able to grow health crops for healthy people. What I think the most important thing is to go back to the basics of soil analysis. You need to know what type of soil do you have and analyze in a natural way, making balls, making sausages, and also checking the soil in water to check the profile. How much clay do we have? How much sand do we have? Loam soil and the silt in the soil. And after working on that, then you are able now to apply the exact amount of nutrients that are required for specific crops. Next slide. So as you see in our next slide, we are going to mainly talk about the nutrients, minerals that are found in the soil, the major minerals that are found in the soil. Out of these minerals that are found in the soil, the major ones we know are nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, sulfur. These are the major elements that a plant requires. But for these plants to acquire these elements, it is us who have to make sure that the soil is good. So we can also talk about the minor elements or minor nutrients that are found in the soil. The minor nutrients that are found in the soil are iron, magnesium, molybdenum, manganese, boron, copper, zinc, chlorine. All these elements, minerals, are found in the soil. But sometimes if the soil is poor, all these minor nutrients might not be there. So we need to build soil so that the major nutrients or major elements for the soil and the minor ones are found in the soil so that the plant can grow happily. So on our next slide, we are going to talk about the techniques. We are no more looking at the techniques or how we can improve soils in our gardens. And once we are clear of these techniques and we know how to apply these techniques, then we are able to grow any type of crop. It doesn't matter the soil is clay, silt, sand, or any type. The major thing is that as long you practice these techniques, then a plant can get the major nutrients and the minor nutrients that are required for a plant to grow. So on this, we all know about compost making or compost. And the compost, it is a system that we can do at our homestead. There are different types of compost that you can make. I'll try to explain some of them as we go on. Earthworm farming is something that we need to make sure that we have at home. For example, here I do earthworm farming, and this is sort of the soil you get from the earthworm. And when we have this type of soil, it is the soil that is good for a plant to grow. And you can build this with the different kind of elements, or manure, or grass, leaves. So for example, here, this is an earthworm. And this earthworm, there are several of them. Some they call it the red earthworm. So they multiply fast, and after they make the compost, then I use the compost for growing my crops. We also have liquid manure, and liquid manure is a method that you can either ferment the animal manure, or you can use green matter, like some, you can use weeds, like blackjack, like amaranthus, like chickweeds, anything that grows in your garden that is a weed can be used to make liquid manure. I'll explain again the way of making liquid manure. Also, things like comfrey, like this is comfrey leaves. You can use these comfrey leaves to make sure that you can make liquid manure. Just put it in a drum, and I'll show you some picture of that. You can use also what you call station planting. This is where you dig a hole, and you fill the hole with the compost, not animal manure, but compost, or organic matter, which decompose, and eventually it supports the crops that are planted around the pit, or the station, what we call the station planting. Alley system, it is a way of also bringing nutrients back in the soil by planting crops that are, let's say, main crop that are hay feeders like maize, but planting it in alley with the cover crops like lab, lima bean, mukuna, or cowpeas, planted in lines. Then you cut back some of these, the nitrogen fixing plants, and use them as mulch on the ground. And that will be either, you can call it green manure, and or green manure cover crop, because it will help you to improve the soil and make the soil rich. Mulching, it's also linked to green manure cover crops. The mulching that we talk about, it's a mulch that cover the grass, mulch that cover the soil, mulch that cover the weeds, a mulch that builds soils in your garden. Then trench beds, it's another method that you can use to make sure that the soils are improved. Pit beds in the garden, they are used to make sure that soils are improved. And also bokashi, which is another method related to compost. But with bokashi, it's in other form, it's anaerobic way of making compost. And there are also aerobic way of making compost. And these methods, they are good in speeding up when you need nutrients in your garden. You can make them and pile them, store them, and use them whenever you need to apply these nutrients in your garden. So basically, we are talking of compost. As you see on the picture, we have a heap of compost. This is different organic matter that are set in layers and build up. This is within my farm here in Midrand. You build up layers of organic matter. When you build up these layers, it is important to consider the ratio of 25 or 5 to 25, which is 5 centimeter layer of nitrogen component, that is manure from animals like goats, like sheep, like chickens. And the 25 centimeter layer is all the organic matter in terms of leaves, in terms of grass, dry grass, in terms of straw or maize stovers that you put in layers to build up the compost. As you build up the compost in that way, you also add or sprinkle wood ash, or you can sprinkle, you can also use chicken manure, not chicken manure, kitchen waste that you can sprinkle in the compost. And then you put layers. It can be, these layers are repeated, and it can be 3 layers of each up to the top, and then you cover the top with a tent, or you cover the top with straw. Then it decomposes. So where you see someone is standing there, it's stage 2. The stage 1, that's what I explained. And the stage 2 is when you turn the compost into that container, and after that you turn it into the other container below, which is now stage 3. This is done every 2 weeks, to turn compost into that level. Compost can be done on the second slide. Compost can be done in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks, it's ready. So you can turn it every 4 days. Every 4 days, depends with the material you use. Like the gentleman below with a cap, that compost can be turned every 2 weeks, every 4 days or 5 days. And then at the end of the day, you have a good compost like what you see on the right side. Compost can be done in containers, as you see in the following slide. You can make small containers like what you see on the picture. Like the first one on the left, it is a container, a plastic container. You put compost in layers until it's full, and then you add water, and then it decomposes. When you turn, you just lift that container or open the container, and then turn the matter into another compost. The other one below, it's where you have a bottom exit of compost. You collect your compost for use from the bottom part of the compost. It's a wooden box that you can use. And the top one on the right, it's also a box that is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, and you can make compost out of that. Or you can make that box 2 meter by 2 meter by 2 meter and make compost and set it in layers. And this will speed up the decomposition of compost. Next slide. So the end result, what we are trying to do is to make sure that we are creating the right food web in the compost, different elements, different microorganisms or microbes in the compost, to make sure that you provide the soil with good nutrients. So this is just an example of the soil food web for health soil, that within the soil, when you apply compost, you will see these microorganism activating. If you do not see this microorganism in the soil, it all means the soil is poor. If you dig soil in your garden and you find the soil is not having any microorganisms or microbes, then the soil is so poor. Next slide. So these are examples that I encourage people to do when you are starting your garden. I encourage you to do a mini trench bed that is 30 centimeter to 40 centimeter deep, a wide 1.2 meter wide, and that, or a workable length. So it can be 1 meter, 2 meter length. Then you dig and apply the organic matter in the trench, and then you cover with soil. When you apply the organic matter in the soil, you put in layers like you are making compost. So the dry matter at the bottom the green matter or animal manure followed, the wood ash followed, and the kitchen waste followed, or these sweepings from the house followed. You continue until the trench is full. Then when the trench is full, you close, and then you can leave it after and leave it to decompose, and then after 2 weeks you plant. Because if you plant immediately, what it means that your plants might die because of the heat that is coming from the compost. And this trench, you are creating a bank of nutrients in the soil. And any plant, the first season, when you plant the crops on this, they can grow fast, grow well, and they can be able to leave some of the nutrients for other crops or the succession of planting that you can do. After first crop, second season, third season, even fourth season, you can still grow new crops in this bed because the nutrients are maintained there. The most important thing, again, when you have done this, keep on mulching the top, the surface. Keep on applying the blanket of the soil. And when you keep on doing that, it helps the nutrients to be built back. All the minerals that we talked about earlier will be built back and supported in the ground. So the next slide is, we are talking about the liquid manure. So when you have crops that are not growing well in your garden, it is good to identify materials that you can use for liquid manure. As I say earlier, you can use weeds in the garden, any plants that you don't like or that you are not using in your garden. Put them in a sack and then drop them in a container like you see those two gentlemen. Put them in a container, and then after a few days, 4 days to 6 days, then you use the water for irrigating your crops. It is a quick way of having nutrients or manure or compost or fertilizer for the soil, for the plants. It is a fast way of getting fertilizer for the plants. You can do the same method with the animal manure, and when you do the same method with animal manure, the animal manure is fermented for 3 days, 4 days. When it's fermented, you collect that animal manure, and then you use the liquid. Then you use it in the garden to feed your soil, to feed the plants. And usually, when you are doing this, you dilute 1:3 for the field crops, or because sometimes if you do not dilute it properly, it can kill plants because it's very high, it's very strong for certain plants. We can use 1:5 for seedlings. That is when you are growing your seedlings in a nursery. You can use the same liquid for the seedlings. So it helps us to improve the soil. Many people, they wonder how we can improve the soil in the garden when you have lots of newspapers, card boxes. These can be used to improve the soil through a method called sheet mulching. Sheet mulching, where you have layers of material of card boxes, newspapers. You sprinkle manure or compost on top. You put another layer, and then another layer of grass. Then, like the one you see, the picture you see on the slide here, it cannot end like this because it's become mess in your garden. You need to add manure compost on top of those newspapers. After that, you add dry grass. And then after that, you plant. And when you plant, all the weeds and all these newspapers will decompose and give nutrients to the ground. Okay, you can also do earthworm farming, or in your compost, a compost can be turned into earthworm farming, where as you make your compost, eventually it should provide earthworms. It should provide nutrients that earthworms will like, and earthworms will start to come in there. Once you see the earthworms coming in there, it means the soil pH is neutral, and it means plants, different plants can grow in this environment. And when different crops grows in different environment, which means that you can use this compost for any type of crop. And it can be in the form of vermiculture, where you take the earthworm cast and you can use it in the garden. This earthworm cast can also be diluted with water and then spray on plants if they are attacked by pests. But when you have that spray and on the tree, it all means that the pests are going to be discouraged to continue multiplying on a plant. And then you reduce them, and then at the same time, the plant is getting nutrients from this earthworm cast. The same, this type of soil can generate fungus, and the fungus are indicator that the soil is good. And different type of fungus, some edible, some non-edible, they will try to come in this environment because your soils are good. So if you have indicators of fungus in your garden, it all means your soil has good pH. So it is important to note that. We can grow diverse of crop for green manure or green manure cover crop. The green manure methods are in different forms. For example, you can use plants like sun hemp, which you can grow. You see, the sun hemp is the one that is having yellow flower. And when it's about to flower like that, you cut it back and then it covers the ground. And then it helps the nutrients in the soil. Also, you can use the other plants like pigeon pea, which you can cut. Pigeon pea is the one that's after at the back, right in the end of, it's right on the end of at the back of the picture. The pigeon pea, you can cut it back in the method called ratoning, R-A-T-O-O-N, which is a means of cutting back plants so that they shoot, and then they provide lots of biomass. Then you use that biomass back into the soil, and it helps in the improving the soil, and the biomass even attract or develop microbes, and these microbes will be good to activate in the soil. So it is important to have this happening in the improvement of the soil. So when we talk about soil improvement, there are few checklists that you need to be aware of. And the checklist that we are looking at is the checklist of the cover the ground with mulch or green manure cover crops. When we say cover the ground with mulch or green manure cover crop, we are talking about the crops. The green manure are crops that you leave them growing in the field, and then you leave them to cover the ground, or you cut them back. They help you in providing biomass that are required by the plants. And mulching, we talk about mulching all the time. It is important to have ground covered by mulch. And mulch even in the pathways. Usually in my garden, I make compost when I'm starting a garden, but after some time, I do not make compost. I do what we call cut and drop. The cut and drop system is you cut leaves of trees, vegetables, anything that is growing there in terms of shaping your trees, all the matter goes back onto the ground as mulch. And eventually they decompose and provide nutrients. And when I keep on mulching in the pathway, what I do is after a certain period, I take the soil in the bedside and cover the pathway. And then I grow crops in the pathway area, because the pathway area it accumulates lots of nutrients, and then that will be the time after maybe 6 months or even a year to be time to convert the pathway into a bed, into a vegetable bed, by taking soil into the vegetable bed, the other side of the vegetable bed, and cover the pathway, and then within the pathway grow plants. You will see plants will grow amazingly, well, healthy, and it is all about mulching, keep on mulching and feeding the soil in the pathway, and it will give you good nutrients for the crops. Soil should be soft and easy to work with. Make sure that the soil in your garden is soft all the time, so that the nutrients you put on the surface is able to infiltrate in the soil, so that plants will follow the nutrients, collect the nutrients, and make the plant happy. If soil is hard, just loosen it, keep on mulching and loosen it a bit with fork. Do not turn the soil. Once you turn the soil, the microorganism will die, or microbes will die, and then your soil become poor. Do not sprinkle or apply animal manure on the surface. There is a difference between animal manure and compost. Animal manure is anything that is coming from, it's an excretion or solid excretion from animals like goats, sheep, cattle, donkeys, horses, chickens. All the excretion from those animals, solid excretion from those animals are called manure. If you take manure, you use it direct in the garden, usually what will happen is sometimes it will kill plants, or sometimes it will be very high in acid or high in alkaline. So it is recommended that we take the animal manure into a compost. Compost it in a different way you like, but as long the manure is composted. Because if you apply it in the garden, direct can bring weeds, it can bring seeds, it can bring fungus, bacteria, viruses, and they multiply, and then they will attack your crops. So it's important that it is composted and used as compost. And compost as a humus is where the plant gets its food. Feed the soil with the decomposed compost. This is where it's very important. A same decomposed compost might carry bacteria that are not good, or funguses that are not good. Make sure the compost is well decomposed, and you see that every leaves are turned to soil. You cannot continuously see the twigs in the compost. So if you continuously receive or see some twigs, then the compost is not well decomposed. So make sure that the compost become humus that is good for the plant to grow. There is some means of making compost or bokashi decompose faster. Some they add minerals like rock phosphate, like bone meal into the compost or into the bokashi, so that it provides you with all the other minerals that might not be found from plants, from other organic sources. So it is recommended that you bring some stone crushed or the stone powder, stone dust into the compost to help with the nutrients that might not be available in the materials that you use to make compost or bokashi. Crop rotate, improve nutrient content in the soil. There are two types of crop rotation, that is formal crop rotation and non-formal crop rotation. The formal crop rotation is where you look at the leaf crop, the fruit, the root crop, and the herbaceous crops. You rotate and the legumes, and you look at after legume, you bring a leaf crop, or after a leaf crop, you bring something light feeder like carrot or the root, and that is normal for the formal crop rotation. In formal crop rotation, it's whereby you have a line of spinach in the same bed and a line of beans and line of carrots or line of garlic. So as they grow together, you can remove beans because beans, they mature faster. You remove the beans and you bring another crop in the same field. Like where there is spinach and the other side you have garlic, you can now bring parsley in between, or you can now bring celery in between after removing the beans. And as you do that, you are crop rotating. When you remove spinach, you can bring some crops like that are not that do not require lots of nutrients. You can either bring legume in the same place that you have removed the spinach, or you plant legume in between spinach to make sure that the spinach is still there, it's benefiting from a legume plant. So at the end of the day, the idea is to improve the soils and making sure that you continuously have the nutrients that are required for the soil or for the crops all the time. Thank you for this. This is what we have for today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John, once again for a very informative session. And you managed to fit such a lot into such a little bit of time. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand straight over to Simon, who will tell us about zero waste. And Simon will speak for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have 10 or so minutes for questions. So please continue to write your questions in the chat. All right, Simon, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Jane, and to all the participants. Jane, I don't know whether am I clear on your side?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah. Firstly, my name is Simon Mbata. I'm from an organization called South African Waste Pickers Association. This is an organization of men and women who are picking the recyclable materials, the reusable materials, or repairable materials within the waste stream to make a living or to earn a living. As an organization, we've been in the sector of waste management, some of us more than 20 years. At that time, the system in the country and in most parts of the world was to collect and dispose waste at places normally called landfill. When this was happening, nobody focused on what is it within waste, what composite waste. In those days, you'll find people without jobs, people who have seen an opportunity to say that there are valuable materials and there are resources that we need within this waste stream that we can recycle, that we can reuse, that makes a living for us. At that time, nobody focused on that. As an organization, when we started engaging a government and working with other partners, we said the system needs to change, where the focus is on collection and disposal. And changing the system, we have to adopt a new way or path or a system That's where the concept of zero waste emerged. And for this concept, there are elements that contribute to making it happen as a concept. For us, we've been saying waste management as a function of a local government by policy or by the issue of our national government. Waste needs to be reduced, that it's been sent to landfills. In this way of reducing waste that's been sent to landfill, we need to build material recovery facility close to the source where waste is generated, so that there can be a diversion to say waste needs to be diverted to this material recovery facility before it reaches to the landfills. The reason being, at the landfills, the conditions are not good for waste pickers or people who are picking for a living to work on those landfills. And if material recovery facilities could be built and waste is diverted in a system where from the household, when we dispose our waste, we have a system where we separate our waste into two waste streams. Where I am right now, I'm in Valpark, where we introduced a zero waste model system where separation at source is happening, where communities are separating their waste into two bin systems. One bin for organics and the other bin for inorganics. And the inorganics, which are normally the recyclables or products, can be diverted to material recovery facilities. Then the organic waste, which is made up of food and the garden refuse, can be diverted to composting areas. For this system, we believed that waste can be managed. Waste needs to be reused again. Within the waste stream, there are a lot of reusable materials. If waste can be separated from the source, diverted to centers, then the recyclable and reusable materials can be identified and brought back to the markets. Also, one element of zero waste that normally fits the puzzle is composting. In South Africa, even in the past, organic waste hasn't been tackled, but we have seen the emerging of small-scale farmers, and we have seen whereby many small-scale farmers or commercial farmers are moving away from chemicals and fertilizers, which are industrial fertilizer. So mostly the organic, which can be composted, can be used, sold to the small-scale farmer. We also believed that organic waste can be tackled in many ways. One other way is through the biodigesters. If it's biodigested, it gives more benefits because you can extract the methane, which you can use also as gas, or which can be used to turn the turbines or to heat the turbines to convert to electricity. Then also, in addition, you get composting out of the byproducts from the extraction of the gas through the biodigestion. So we are, as an organization, believing in the system of zero waste based on the reasons that it will also give dignity to the informal sector. Because if material recovery facilities can be built in every municipality, we will not have a problem that we have of waste. Waste will be recycled, waste will be reused, waste can be composted. We also believed that waste to energy projects are not fitting the puzzle. They are false solutions. How? Most, when we talk of the banning of waste, these projects don't complement circular economy. These projects will also increase emissions, because we believed that if waste to energy projects are to be allowed or seen as part of a zero waste component, they will encourage more extraction, more manufacturing, which you all know the emissions associated with manufacturing, transportation, as well as the extraction companies at the mine levels. So we don't encourage any form of burning of waste. We don't encourage any waste to energy project that involves burning. The form of waste to energy project that we believe work, it's organics being biodigested, methane gas being extracted and being used as an alternative energy. We also, as an organization, believed that zero waste, it will give more economic benefit to waste pickers. How? When materials are sorted from the household level, they won't be contaminated with the organics or the food waste. They give a better price at the market. And if they are not contaminated, the health of the waste pickers is safe, because waste pickers won't come across any contamination or form of or being thrown or being dirty through the contamination. So it has those economic benefits to the products. It also has benefits to waste pickers, and it places their health at safe places where there are no diseases. Environmentally, also, we still believe that zero waste programs are more better compared to other forms of waste management. If waste doesn't go to landfill, it eliminates the production at landfills of many gases, the methane that is always produced through the mixed waste. It will also eliminate the leachate that normally gets produced by the mix of waste and goes to the underground water. It also eliminates littering, because most of the waste gets recycled. Another component of zero waste, we believe it encourages also designers to say that these are products that are not recyclable. Why should they be produced? So within the zero waste system, products that are not recyclable, products that are not reusable, we are saying, why produce them in the first place? So elements of zero waste is to eliminate those products that end up contaminating the rivers, that ends up in our seas, that also ends up in our environment. So also, we are facing a challenge in terms of unemployment in the country. We believed that if waste can be managed in a zero waste model, there are a number of jobs that can be secured. There are a number of jobs also that can emerge, because the more we divert waste, the more recycling waste will be available and the more people will be in a place of getting food on the table. So we also believed that if all products can be recycled, this will eliminate the emissions. For an example, some of the products are mined, transported, processed in industries, then sent to retailers. Then they get lost in the system as waste. But through recycling, bringing back to the system, you have eliminated a number of emissions that were in the first place when the product was made. So in a nutshell, zero waste is a way to go. We believed that there's no problem in managing waste. The problem is in fixing our system. There's no waste. What we see, what people call waste, we see resources, we see valuable materials. So in a nutshell, there's no waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. That was really great. There's so much going on behind the scenes when it comes to our waste system. And so thank you for sharing that with us. And also just thank you for all the work that you are doing. Please keep it up. It's really great to have you with us today. So we've got a little bit of time for questions. I'm just going to go through the chat. Just a reminder that if you do have any questions still, please write them in the chat and we'll try to address all of them. So we'll start with a question. So Keith wrote this question to John, but I think maybe Simon, you could also address it, and you actually did address some of it in your presentation. So he is saying that the Western Cape are considering implementing biogas facilities to generate gas from organic waste. Empirical evidence have shown that community composting and home composting are 90% less costly than a biogas plant. And so what is your organization doing to discourage, are you doing anything to discourage municipalities from burning organic waste to promote rather a zero waste process? So maybe Simon, you could answer that one. And John, if you also have anything to say on that. Go for it.
Okay, Jane, can I get one?
Yeah.
Okay, firstly, Jane, the organics, the process of deriving energy from organics, it's different from the other processes of deriving energy within other waste forms. The biodigestion of waste is having a multiple benefit. Firstly, we live in a dirty energy times where most of our energy is produced from coal. And in producing energy through the extraction of methane, and it's much better and cleaner than producing energy from burning of other forms of waste. Also, if you extract methane, methane can be used in two ways. It can be used also as a gas in itself, which is organic and cleaner than the usual gases that we use. It can be cylindered. Innovation has proven that. Secondly, the heating of the turbines or to convert to electricity, it's much safer than coal and the other forms of waste to energy production. Also, it has a byproduct, which is a compost in itself, which is highly nutrient. So for us as SAWPA, we believe this could also be seen as another way or form of managing waste. We don't discourage where organics are managed. Yes, in terms of, as Kate is saying, putting up a project financially, it's costly to put up such a structure. But it needs proper consultation. It needs broader vision, because within this system, I have seen it in other countries, where even in India, where a university, it's run through a biodigester. They are using all the waste from the kitchen within the university. They run to create electricity for the university. It saves a lot. It's better than getting from coal or whatever. So those are some of the benefits. Yes, we're still debating scientifically, because other forms of extracting methane is pyrolysis, which is not clean methane. We are discouraging dirty forms of methane extraction. But if it's organics, it's a clean methane. It can be turned into electricity. So that's my intake in terms of the biodigesters. But in terms of other forms of waste to energy where waste is banned, no, we don't encourage, because there are emissions associated with burning. So biodigestion doesn't ban. It's about decomposing of waste.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that, Simon. And then we've just got some questions for John. So John, if you do want to answer that one, you could maybe add on to some other questions that we've got for you. So Karen is saying, can cuttings of juniper and cypress trees be used for green mulch, or do they have a bad effect on the soil? And then I just have a question to add to that. Is there any kind of organic matter from the garden or from our kitchen that we should keep out of our compost heaps? So John, if you could just answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. I think most plants can be used in compost, but if you look at the junipers and the cypress, the eucalyptus, usually they are high in acid. So if you have lots of them, then the texture or the pH of the soil can change to acidic. So you need to monitor the acidic levels of your compost. And most green plants, like if a plant is still green, usually it doesn't give much of the, it is high also in nitrogen, actually, when a plant is green. So when it's green, you put in a compost, there is earthworms, then earthworms will balance the pH out of that. That's very important.
Okay, thank you.
About the biogas, just want to contribute a little bit about the biogas. We, in rural areas, if you go in rural areas, you find lots of old crows where people, they don't use animal manure. People, they don't use the waste. It is important that you convert that into biogas. And once that is converted into biogas, then there is no waste. And also the human waste actually can be converted into biogas and can provide good energy into households. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. And then another question just about composting. How much sun and water does a compost heap need?
The sunlight, a compost needs sunlight, but you need to prevent direct sunlight and need not to make the compost dry. Once it gets dry, usually the microbes can die and microorganisms can die. Water, not too much. You can use what we call a stick thermometer, which you can push it into the compost. And when you pull it and you find the stick thermometer is damp or is too wet at the bottom, then it means there's too much water in the compost. And sometimes when there is too much heat, the stick thermometer can show you the fungus, white fungus on the stick, which means the compost is too much, it has too much heat, and it also kills some microorganisms in there. So that could be the time for turning it so that you reduce the the too much water and also use too much heat into the compost.
And then there's one question which isn't quite related, but I think we can ask it quickly. What can someone use for worms who are eating cabbage, John?
That's like a pest.
Yeah.
A worm that is eating cabbage. Yeah,
Yes.
no, the worms, there are different worms that eat cabbages. So if the worms are eating cabbages and you see them, the best is to make teas and spray on them. You can use wood ash mixed with the soap and a little bit of cooking oil, and then you spray. Or you can use the tobacco leaves and soak them in water overnight, and you can spray. You can use Tephrosia plants, soak them in water overnight, and spray on the cabbages. There are lots of plants that we can use to make teas for spraying any pest in the garden. Thank you.
Okay,
Also,
thanks, John.
encouraging predators, like if you have flowers like the fennel in the garden, it can attract wasps. The wasps will come and then attracted by the flower, but when they see a worm, then they go for the worm.
Okay, thanks. I'm aware that we're a little bit over time, so just the last two questions, and these are for Simon. John, maybe you also know this one. So firstly, Simon, is it possible for people to join the South African Waste Pickers Association, and how do they go about doing that? And then another question is, what are the typical costs and considerations to implement the biomass or biogas extraction for a residential home, but then also scaling up for a large institution like a university?
Okay, thanks, Jane. Firstly, in terms of being a member, as an organization, we represent people who are picking waste for the purpose of recycling, for the purpose of reuse, for the purpose of repairing it. The types of people that we normally represent are landfill-based. We have people who every day wake up in the morning, go to the landfills, pick waste from those areas. We also have those that we always see on our streets every day pulling trolleys in our street, in our bins. So we represent also those people. We have those people that are operating material recovery facilities. We have those people that are operating buyback centers. And we have also people who are working from homes in our communities. They pick from the illegal dumping site within our communities. We represent. And the way of engaging, we normally give out forms, which I, being employed by the organization as a national coordinator, and we have provincial coordinators. In every province, we have provincial coordinators. Whoever is in every province, we link up with the provincial coordinators. Then there are registration forms, and also there will be procedures to follow in terms of joining. Sorry, as a reminder, the last question in terms of the cost putting up such a structure, we always saying things, we don't need to put up big infrastructures to manage waste. Biomass is a big infrastructure. We normally call upon to say there are small scale biodigesters. And we also encourage to say that biodigestion of waste can happen from households. Even composting of waste can happen from our household. And the mass production of composting in South Africa recently, we don't have markets. That's another challenge that's emerging small-scale farming and competing with commercial farmers who are using fertilizers or chemical manure. So for us, we normally say it can start from a household, a biodigester, which can be affordable. And as the other presenter mentioned, to say that there are a number of waste that can contribute to a household a biodigester. You can link it up with your sewerage system, where you can use human waste also and mix it with the other waste at home. So we don't believe in big scales or commercial scaling of it. We believe in managing waste from the household level. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so it is time to end, but I do see that there's one more question, which is quite important. So John, if you could just address this one, please, and then we will close. So how do you prevent fungus from the compost, and how do you keep it well maintained? Because it needs to breathe and it also needs to have enough water to grow healthy.
Yeah, fungus, do you know we have good funguses, we have good viruses, we have good bacteria, and we also have bad fungus, bad bacteria, bad viruses. The most important thing is the material that you put in a compost. If they have fungus, do not add them in compost. Try to bury them in the ground, like dig a pit which is about 1 meter, and bury those plants with bacteria or fungus. If you have the fungus that is generated in the compost, it is good fungus which is required by plants to grow. That's what I was talking about earlier, to say you will start to see mushrooms coming, which is a good indicator of good soil. So some certain fungus are good.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you so much, John. And thanks again to Simon. Thanks to both for joining us. I think this has been a very informative session, and the comments in the chat also confirm that. Thanks to all the participants for joining us and for your questions. So our next workshop is taking place next week, Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And there we're going to look at seed saving, setting up a seed bank, and we'll have some input from Zion Khan on indigenous seed and food. Courtney will share the link in the chat if you want to register now, but we will also email it and we'll put it out on Facebook. So great. Thanks again,
Jane.
everybody. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time.
Thanks, Jane.
Bye.
All right.